going to be, I would think, some were saying, well, what about femininity? What about that? Is there a toxic femininity that's out there? And how do we keep these two in tension? How do we highlight this masculinity? And yet, how do we also talk about where women and the contributions they've made when traditionally, at least from a societal or secular perspective, women have been put down and their contributions have been minimized? How do we keep both of these in tension in a positive way that we can uphold both genders and what God has made them to be as both image bearers in serving Christ and extending his kingdom in the world?
Yeah, so I mean, it is a book on men, so I deal briefly with women. I deal with women a little bit more in my earlier book, Total Truth. But of course, the Industrial Revolution, when it took men's work out of the home, it took women's work out of the home as well. Women used to be involved in a lot of household manufacture. They used to make canned foods and make their own clothes from scratch and make buttons and make candles and make butter, whatever, make bread from scratch every day. Women had a real economic contribution to make. And even if they didn't have a lot of political rights, they had a strong sense of their economic indispensability, which really bolstered their self-esteem. They knew that they were indispensable to the household. When all of those things, from bread making to fabric making to butter churning, all was taken out of the home, for the first time, women had no economic contribution. Instead, they became economically dependent on the wages of their husbands. This was a huge loss in status. Most people don't think of it that way, but if you're not making a real contribution, I mean, already in the 19th century, you see newspaper writers starting to condemn women at home and say they're idle, they're lazy, they're useless, they're not contributing anything, they just take their husband's money and spend it. I mean, that language already was starting in the 19th century. And because women were not making an economic contribution, they also had less voice in the home. In other words, if they asked their husbands to contribute to the housework and the childbearing, well, that was her job, so that was nagging. So I think it's important to recognize that women also lost a lot in the Industrial Revolution. And we need to come back to the cultural mandate. Women are not just isolated to raising children and keeping the house clean, but women also were made to subdue the earth. Many women, I love raising children. I had a blast raising kids. I love it. But a lot of us do have talents and skills and interests and abilities that do go beyond what can be done in the modern household. And I think the answer for women is similar as to men, which is, can we bring some of that productive work back to the home? I do know a lot of women who do already. I mean, almost every woman I know who's home raising kids is also doing some kind of income producing work. They're having some kind of a home-based business or telecommuting or whatever. Most couples can't really afford it anymore unless the woman is working part-time. So women are already doing this to a large extent, but I think we need to sort of rethink what that means. That women are called to subdue the earth just as much as men are, and that we should encourage that. Finding ways to do it without just turning your kids over to paid substitutes, though, is what I think what troubles a lot of people is, we have father absence, and that's been harmful. We don't want that followed by mother absence. Then who raises the kids? Why bother having them if you're not going to raise them? So I'm really big on raising young kids. I mean, I homeschooled my two sons, and because I loved it. I mean, I just loved being with them all the time. But I also, you can see behind me, I have my books. I was always working part-time while I raised my kids. So I was, editing books while sitting alongside the karate class, editing books while sitting beside the swimming lessons and so on. And people would come and say, what are you doing? I'm editing a book. And they weren't expecting that. But I did. I did a lot of work in my car office Well, I had one son who did a volunteer work at a nature center, and I sat outside in my car office doing my work. So women for a long time have been using this kind of flexibility to try to keep their intellect and their other interests going while raising their kids. And I think we should really work hard on making that as much as possible the ideal for both parents. Can we, in a sense, recreate some of the ethos of the colonial age where the family, had so much more cohesion? The economic interdependence really reinforced their sense of emotional interdependence and made the family much stronger.